One of the things I like to do as a woodworker is maintain my own equipment. And one of the things I need to do right now is sharpen the knives on my jointer. I just put this rough piece of stock through, and there are some lines here that indicate there are some nicks in the knives. To do that, I'm going to use my Tormek. Now, I bought this long before I got into wood turning, when I first got into woodworking, well over 20 years ago. It's still running just fine. I've replaced the wheel once, not that long ago, and I really like this machine. One of the first jigs I got for it was this one for doing your own planer and jointer knives, the SVH 320. Now, to use this, you set it in here, you have to adjust the height. The knives go into this unit, then it sits on here and holds the knives against the wheel while it spins. It's a wet wheel unit, does a beautiful job. It's not very fast like a grinder, but does a super job. The wet keeps the wheel cool. You never have to worry about overheating your knives, your blades, whatever you want to sharpen. So now I guess the first thing I need to do is take the knives, or one at a time, take the knives out of the jointer and sharpen them. Let's take a look at taking the knife out. Now, this should be obvious, but in case it's not, it's always easy to forget things. The first thing you want to do when you're maintaining your jointer, or any other power tool for that matter, is unplug it. Accidents happen. If the machine is turned on somehow while it's still plugged in and your hand is anywhere near that cutter, you are going to have a serious accident. I can't even imagine something that terrible happening. Now, the first thing you want to do is move the cutter head guard out of the way. And I like to use a big clamp just to hold it so it stays out of the way. Next thing I want to do, in this case I use an 8mm wrench to loosen the screws that are holding the knives in place. And I do them one at a time. I always number the knives so that I make sure I do them in the same order. 1, 2, 3, one at a time. Now, when these are all loosened, I'll be able to pull that knife out. And now with the knife out, I can see the nicks and chips in it. It's pretty bad. So now I'll take this over to the Tormek, put it in the planer jig, and sharpen it. Now, with the knife ready to go, I need to put it into the jig. First thing I like to do is use a Sharpie marker and just color the entire bevel black. Makes it much easier to tell when you've actually got spots on it sharpened. Now, with the whole thing colored black, I'll put it into the jig holder, putting it with the bevel down, and there's a little lip that keeps it from going in too far, maintains it in a parallel angle all the way across. And with these short 6-inch knives, I just need to tighten these 3, but I'll snug up the end ones as well. Now, I've pre-adjusted this. There's an adjustment on the back which controls the tilt in this way, and then these wheels are used to adjust the height, so you can lower it down onto the wheel as you need to. Let me just test this now. It's also got stops to make sure that it doesn't go all the way past. You can adjust these. There's a little follower, and when it hits these stops, that's as far as it'll go. Of course, if you're using 12-inch planer knives, you'd adjust those out. Now I'll take a look. And it seems to be sharpening evenly. You can see some areas that are still a little bit black, so they just need to be sharpened all the way across, and then I'll be looking to see when those little nicks have disappeared. So I'll finish sharpening this, and I'll be back. It's looking pretty good. Now I'll use a magnifying glass, the light behind it, and I can't see any nicks, so I believe that's got it. Now the next step will be to take it out of the jig and hone it. So to do that, I just need to turn this around. And I want to hone it with the rotation of the wheel away from me. This is the honing wheel, it's a leather wheel. Don't ask me how I learned this, but I wear gloves now when I do the honing. Holding that in your hand, well, trust me on this, you can get a fairly decent cut if you're not careful. So I'm going to start by honing the back side. And then I will do the bevel. That's taken off that little burr nicely. I believe that's got it. Now I'll put it back in the jointer. I've taken out this piece and the springs and just blown the dust out of there to clean it up. Now I have a jig called the jointer pal that's used to set the knives at the right height. This one was made by Delta well over 20 years ago. I don't think they even exist anymore, last I was told, but they still are being made by a company called Woodstock International. I found them on Amazon.com and Amazon.ca. I believe they're around $32 or $33 US. Very handy. I'm not sure how I could do this without this jig. Get these springs back in. I'll set this back in place. Put the knife in here. And I just have to set it by eye as far as centering it in this direction. And again, I'm trying real hard not to cut myself. That is extremely sharp. Then I use the jointer pal, which has 3 magnets on each of these arms. And I want to put a pair of magnets over the knife itself and have that hold it. Then when the jointer pal is down snug on here, I know I've got the same height all the way along, and I can tighten up these screws to hold it. Now with 3 holding it, it should be tight enough that I can do the 4th one without moving the knife. I'm going to finish putting this one in, and I'm going to sharpen the other 2. And I'll come back and do a test piece on another chunk of wood and see how that turns out for nicks. Hopefully there won't be any. I did a little test after sharpening and replacing the knives. Did a beautiful job. I'm very happy with it. One thing I forgot to do on the first knife was to put this rubber tray underneath, and so I had water all over my work surface. Put it in for the 2nd and 3rd, made quite a difference. Now, you might be thinking, the Tormek is awful expensive. I remember when I bought it a long time ago thinking, that's a ridiculous amount of money. But I have sharpened my planer and jointer knives more times than I could count. So over time, maybe it's paid for itself, maybe not. But the thing is, if I find out in the morning that my planer knives need sharpening, by the end of the day, I've got them sharpened and I'm back to work. If I take them into somebody to do it professionally, I'm going to wait 2 or 3 days and it's going to cost me a fair amount of money. So I like the time savings if nothing else. So if you haven't got one and you're considering it, I recommend them. Like I say, they're expensive, but they're a wonderful machine. The new ones are more powerful. A lot of gadgets have been added since I got mine. I think you'd like one. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Hope you enjoyed this. Be safe in your shop. Thanks for dropping by. Don't forget to subscribe. Take care now.